Right now, somewhere in your city, someone is complaining about the cold. They pull their jacket tighter, they check their phone for the temperature, they walk faster toward a warm building. None of this should work. Not really. Your body was never built for concrete and central heating. But the real answer to why winter still terrifies something deep inside you is far stranger than a jacket can fix. 200,000 years ago, there was no first day of winter. There was no calendar warning your ancestors that the cold was coming. There was only a slow, creeping change in the light, shorter days, colder nights, and a growing, wordless dread that something in the world was dying. Your ancestors didn't understand seasons the way you do. They didn't know the earth was tilting on its axis. They didn't know the sun would return. All they knew was that the world that had fed them all summer was disappearing, piece by piece, and nobody could tell them it would come back. Think about that for a moment. Imagine watching the world die and having no idea if it was permanent. Anthropologist Sarah Hrdy has spent decades studying early human survival, and one thing she keeps returning to is this: the earliest humans were not the strongest animals on the savanna, they were not the fastest. What kept them alive was cooperation, foresight, and fear used correctly. Fear wasn't a flaw in early humans. It was a tool, and winter was the sharpest test of that tool. Here's what actually happened inside their bodies. As the days shortened, human brains began producing more melatonin, the hormone that controls sleep and mood. Less daylight meant more melatonin, which meant more drowsiness, more low energy, more of that heavy sinking feeling you might recognize from a gray afternoon in December. This wasn't weakness. It was biology preparing the body to slow down, to conserve energy, to survive on less. At the same time, the drop in temperature triggered something called non-shivering thermogenesis. Brown fat tissue in the body would activate burning stored energy just to generate heat. Your ancestors' bodies were quietly at war with the cold every single hour, whether they felt it or not. But the physical fight was never the real battle. The real battle was psychological. Picture a small group of early humans, maybe 20 to 30 people, huddled in a shelter as the first frost hits the ground. The berries are gone, the migratory animals have left. The nights stretch longer than anyone can remember. There is no restaurant, no stored grain in a pantry, no guarantee of tomorrow's meal. What do you think that group felt? Not sadness the way you might feel it after a bad day, something closer to a controlled collective panic, a tightening. Every decision suddenly had weight. Who eats first? Who goes without? Who searches for food in the freezing dark and who stays back to protect the children? Researcher Robin Dunbar, known for his work on the social brains of early humans, has argued that harsh seasonal pressure is one of the reasons human social groups grew as complex as they did. When resources vanish, trust becomes survival currency. You cannot make it through winter alone. You need people who will share when they have little and who will remember that you did the same for them. Winter didn't just test bodies. It tested bonds. This is where something remarkable happened. Winter may have been one of the forces that pushed early humans toward deeper cooperation, storytelling around fire, and long-term planning. You don't panic about tomorrow if you live only in today. But once your ancestors began storing food, marking the changing light, remembering which plants would return in spring, they were doing something no other animal on Earth was doing at that scale. They were negotiating with time itself. And this is the part that should make you sit up. Archaeological evidence from sites in Ice Age Europe shows early humans storing meat in permafrost pits, essentially building the first refrigerators tens of thousands of years before anyone imagined a kitchen appliance. They dug holes into frozen ground and used the cold itself as a weapon against starvation. The very thing trying to kill them became the tool that kept them alive. Anthropologist Brian Hare, who studies the evolution of human cognition, points out that this kind of long-range problem-solving, planning for a threat that hasn't arrived yet, is one of the clearest markers separating early humans from other primates. Winter forced foresight, foresight forced planning, planning forced trust. And trust built the earliest scaffolding of what would eventually become human society. But foresight didn't erase fear. It just gave fear a job. Every autumn, as the days shortened, that same melatonin shift likely deepened into something heavier for groups already stretched thin by a bad summer. Some researchers believe this seasonal weight, the sluggishness, the low mood, the quiet dread, may be an ancient echo still wired into your brain today. You call it the winter blues now. Doctors call it seasonal affective disorder. But the mechanism is ancient. Your body still reacts to shortening light the way it did when shortening light meant real physical danger. Here's the strange part. You don't have to hunt for food in the snow anymore. You don't have to wonder if your children will make it to spring. But some quiet part of your nervous system doesn't know that yet. Have you ever felt an unexplainable low mood settle in around late autumn, even when nothing in your life has actually gone wrong? That's not random. That's not weakness. That is tens of thousands of years of programmed vigilance still running in the background of a body that no longer needs it the way it once did. Psychologist Norman Rosenthal, who first identified seasonal affective disorder in the 1980s, noted that this pattern shows up most strongly in populations living farther from the equator, where the drop in daylight is most extreme. In other words, the places where your ancestors' winters were harshest are the same places where this ancient alarm system still rings the loudest today. Your ancestors survived winter through three things: cooperation, foresight, and ritual. Fires were lit not just for warmth, but for gathering. Stories were told not just for entertainment, but to pass down survival knowledge disguised as myth. Long nights, instead of being empty, became full of connection. The darkness that should have isolated them instead pulled them closer together. That's the twist most people never expect. Winter didn't just threaten early humans. It may have shaped some of the most human things about you. Your instinct to check on people you love when things get hard. Your craving for warm light and gathered company on a cold night. Your strange comfort in a shared meal when the weather turns. None of that is random sentimentality. It's inherited strategy. So the next time the days get shorter and something in you quietly braces for impact, you're not imagining things, you're not being dramatic. You're running code written by people who watched the sun disappear a little more each day and had no proof it would ever come back. They didn't have heating. They didn't have stored calendars predicting spring. What they had was each other, a fire, and the discipline to plan for a future they couldn't see yet. And somehow, that was enough. So right now, somewhere in your city, someone is complaining about the cold, pulling their jacket tighter, hurrying towards somewhere warm. But the real reason that shiver runs deeper than the temperature has nothing to do with the weather outside. It has everything to do with a memory your body refuses to forget.